Hours before my brother's wedding, a cryptic message warned, "Don't go, check your husband's garage." I thought it was a joke, until I opened the door. Then I froze. Everything was supposed to be perfect today. My brother Patrick was finally marrying Shannon, his college sweetheart, and I'd spend months helping plan every detail of their dream wedding. I'd covered part of the catering costs when money got tight, addressed invitations until my hand cramped, and chosen the perfect navy dress that would photograph beautifully without upstaging the bride. But now I stood frozen in my bathroom, staring at a text message from an unknown number that made my stomach drop to my feet. The words blurred as I read them again. Something about not going to the wedding, about checking my husband's garage, about seeing something before it was too late. The mascara wand trembled in my other hand as I reread the message. Don't go to the wedding. Check your husband's garage. You need to see this before it's too late. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale, uncertain, nothing like the confident maid of honor I was supposed to be in 3 hours. The excitement I'd felt waking up at dawn had evaporated completely, replaced by a cold dread that settled in my chest like a stone. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of truth and family protection. If you believe in standing up for those we love, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I've been so proud of how this day was unfolding. My alarm had gone off at 5:30, but I was already awake, too excited to sleep. Patrick was my baby brother, 2 years younger, and watching him find happiness with Shannon had filled me with a joy I hadn't experienced in years. Their relationship had been a steady, comfortable love story. College sweethearts who supported each other through graduation, job searches, and the inevitable growing pains of young adulthood. Shannon brought out the best in Patrick. She encouraged his dream of starting his own landscaping business, helped him organize his finances, and most importantly, made him laugh in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. When he proposed last Christmas, down on one knee in our parents' living room with the whole family watching, Shannon's tearful yes had been the highlight of our year. The wedding planning had become my project as much as theirs. Shannon's own family lived across the country, and her mother's health issues meant she couldn't travel for the ceremony. I'd stepped in eagerly, thrilled to help create the perfect day for them. We'd spent countless Saturday afternoons touring venues, tasting cake samples, and debating flower arrangements. When Patrick mentioned their budget was getting tight after unexpected car repairs, I'd quietly covered the difference for the upgraded catering package without making it seem like charity. Every detail had been carefully planned. The ceremony was scheduled for noon at the historic church where our family had attended services for decades. The reception would be at the community center, decorated with white roses and fairy lights that Shannon had seen on Pinterest. I'd helped her find the perfect dress at a sample sale, and watched her cry happy tears when she tried it on. Patrick had rented a classic black tuxedo that made him look more handsome and grown-up than I'd ever seen him. But now, staring at this message, all those months of careful planning felt fragile and threatened. My phone buzzed again and I nearly dropped it. This time it was my mother. "Jamie, don't forget to pick up the boutonnieres from the florist. Patrick is getting nervous and keeps asking if everything is ready." The normalcy of her text felt surreal against the backdrop of the mysterious morning I just received. I tried to focus on my morning routine. Foundation, concealer, powder, each step automatic after years of practice. But my hands shook as I applied blush, and I had to start over twice when I smudged my eyeliner. The woman in the mirror looked like me but felt like a stranger. Her navy dress hung perfectly, her hair fell in soft waves from yesterday's salon appointment. Her jewelry was elegant but understated. She looked like someone ready to celebrate her brother's happiness, not someone whose world might be about to crumble. Scott had left unusually early that morning, around 7:30. His explanation had been vague, something about needing to handle a few things before the ceremony. At the time, I'd assumed he meant picking up his dry cleaning or stopping by the office to check on a project that had been stressing him lately. But now his departure felt loaded with significance I'd missed. Our 8-year marriage had settled into comfortable patterns. Scott worked as an IT consultant, often putting in long hours during system upgrades or when clients faced technical emergencies. I'd grown accustomed to his irregular schedule, the late-night calls, the weekend work sessions. We weren't the passionate newlyweds we'd once been, but we were partners. Comfortable, stable, or so I'd thought. The kiss he'd given me goodbye that morning replayed in my mind differently now. It had been quick, distracted, more like a routine gesture than genuine affection. His coffee had sat untouched on the kitchen counter while he'd paced, checking his phone repeatedly. When I'd asked if everything was okay, he'd given me that forced smile I recognized from stressful work periods and assured me everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine, was it? I set my phone on the bathroom counter and tried to breathe normally. The rational part of my brain insisted this was ridiculous. Some random person was trying to ruin Patrick's wedding day with baseless accusations or cruel pranks. I should delete the message, finish getting ready, and focus on being the supportive sister Patrick needed today. Yet something deeper, more intuitive, whispered that I should pay attention. The garage key was buried in my jewelry box, underneath tangled necklaces and forgotten earrings. Scott had given it to me months ago during one of his organizational phases, insisting I should have access, just in case. I tossed it in with my jewelry and promptly forgotten about it. Now it felt significant, purposeful, like it had been waiting for this moment. Standing in my bedroom, fully dressed for the wedding, I held the small silver key and felt the weight of choice. I could ignore the message, trust in my marriage, and focus on Patrick's happiness. Or I could walk outside to that innocent-looking garage and potentially discover something that would change everything. The clock on my nightstand showed 9:15. The wedding was at noon. I had time to investigate and still make it to the ceremony, assuming I found nothing more alarming than old paint cans and holiday decorations. But as I walked toward my front door, he clutched in my sweating palm. I knew with absolute certainty that I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. The garage door groaned on its hinges as I pushed it open, a familiar sound I'd heard countless times before. Sunlight streamed through the doorway, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and casting long shadows across the concrete floor. My eyes swept the interior, taking in Scott's old Honda covered with its blue tarp, the metal shelves lined with plastic storage bins, and the familiar clutter of our shared life. For a brief, wonderful moment, relief flooded through me. Everything looked exactly as it should. Paint cans stacked neatly in the corner, our artificial Christmas tree leaning against the far wall, camping gear we hadn't used in 3 years gathering dust on the top shelf. The garage smelled like motor oil, old cardboard, and that particular mustiness of stored belongings. Completely normal, completely innocent. I almost laughed at myself. Here I was, dressed for my brother's wedding, standing in our garage because of some random text message from a stranger. The paranoia felt ridiculous now, embarrassing even. I could already imagine how I'd tell Scott about this later, how we'd shake our heads at the cruel prank someone had played on such an important day. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye that didn't belong. Tucked behind a stack of paint cans, partially concealed by what looked like an old beach towel, was a small wooden chest I'd never seen before. The chest itself wasn't particularly remarkable, maybe the size of a shoebox, made of dark wood with simple brass hinges. But its placement was deliberate, hidden, like someone had tried to conceal it quickly. My heart began racing again as I approached it. The beach towel draped over it was faded blue and white stripes, and I didn't recognize it either. With trembling fingers, I pulled the towel away and stared at the chest. It felt foreign in our space, an intruder among our familiar belongings. The lid opened easily, revealing contents that made my breath catch in my throat. Nestled inside were women's belongings that definitely weren't mine. A delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms, a heart, a star, something that might have been an initial. I'd seen it before but couldn't place where. Matching earrings caught the morning light, their small diamonds sparkling against the dark wood interior. There was a small bottle of expensive perfume, the kind I'd always considered too pricey for everyday wear. The brand was familiar from department store displays, elegant and sophisticated. Beneath the perfume was a silk scarf in soft pastels, still smelling faintly of that expensive fragrance. Each item felt like a puzzle piece, and I had the sinking feeling I knew what picture they were forming. My hands shook as I moved things aside, searching deeper into the chest with a horrible fascination. That's when I found the photographs. The first one I pulled out made my blood turn to ice. Scott's face smiled back at me, but he wasn't alone. His arms were wrapped around a woman with blonde hair and a radiant smile. Shannon, my brother's fiancée, my future sister-in-law, the woman who was supposed to walk down the aisle in 3 hours. They weren't just standing together for a friendly photo. This was intimate, romantic. Scott's hand rested on Shannon's waist in a way that spoke of familiarity, of ownership. Her head tilted toward his shoulder with complete comfort and trust. They looked happy, devastatingly, completely happy. With growing horror, I flipped through more photographs. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the chest like guilty secrets demanding to be discovered. Shannon laughing as Scott spun her around on a beach I didn't recognize. Definitely not anywhere we'd vacationed together. The two of them sharing an ice cream cube, Shannon playfully stealing a bite while Scott grinned at her with pure adoration. The photos spanned different seasons. Here was Shannon in a summer dress, Scott's arm around her shoulders as they posed in front of what looked like a mountain vista. There she was again in a cozy sweater, leaves falling around them in an autumn park. Winter photos showed them bundled up together, faces flushed from cold and laughter. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This wasn't a drunken mistake at some party. This was a relationship sustained and secret, playing out parallel to both their official lives. My vision blurred as the full scope of the betrayal hit me. How long had this been going on? How many times had Shannon sat at our dinner table planning wedding details with me, all while carrying on with my husband? How many nights had Scott come home late, claiming work emergencies when he'd actually been with her? Beneath the photographs, I found something even worse. Printed copies of text message conversations. The paper was slightly worn from being pressed against the wood, and I recognized Scott's phone number immediately. The messages were recent, some from just yesterday. Shit. I can't wait much longer, Scott. Pretending with Patrick is killing me. Scott, after the wedding we'll figure it out. Just a few more hours, babe. Shadow, I love you. Not him. This marriage is just necessary right now. Scott, once you're legally his wife, we can plan our real future together. The words swam before my eyes as their meaning sounded. Shannon wasn't just cheating on Patrick. She was using him. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a calculated business transaction. Marriage for security, for legal benefits, for whatever advantage she could gain, while she planned to continue her real relationship with Scott immediately afterward. 4 messages revealed the depth of their planning. Scott, the reception ends at 5. I can pick you up at 7 from your apartment. Shannon, what about Jamie? Won't she expect you home? Scott, I'll tell her I'm helping clean up the venue. She trusts me completely. Shannon, this is so much harder than I thought it would be. Patrick keeps talking about our honeymoon plans. Scott, 2 more days and we can stop pretending. You're stronger than you know. I sat back on my heels, the printed messages scattered around me like evidence of a crime. Because that's what this was, a crime against Patrick, against me, against the very concept of family and trust and love. The garage suddenly felt suffocating. The innocent storage space had become a vault of secrets, a hiding place for the evidence of the most devastating betrayal I could imagine. My husband and my brother's fiancé weren't just having an affair. They were actively conspiring to destroy Patrick's life while using it for Shannon's benefit. The clock on my phone showed 9:45. In 2 hours and 15 minutes, Patrick would be standing at the altar, believing he was about to marry the woman of his dreams. Instead, he'd be signing on for a life built on lies, manipulation, and calculation. I carefully gathered the photographs and messages, my hands moving with surprising steadiness despite the chaos in my mind. Someone had sent me that morning text for a reason. Someone wanted me to find this evidence, to know the truth before it was too late. And now I had to decide what to do with it. My first instinct was to storm out of that garage, drive straight to the wedding venue, and drag Shannon away from the altar in front of everyone. I wanted to scream, to expose her publicly, to watch her perfect facade crumble before our entire family and all the guests who traveled to witness what they thought was a love story. The rage burning in my chest demanded immediate action, swift justice for the cruelty she was about to inflict on Patrick. But as I knelt there among the scattered evidence of their betrayal, something shifted inside me. The white-hot fury transformed into something colder, more calculating. A voice in my head, maybe my mother's, maybe my own survival instinct, whispered that acting rashly would be exactly what Scott and Shannon could use against me. I could already hear their denials. Jamie's always been jealous of our happiness. She's unstable, trying to ruin the wedding out of spite. But also closer to preventing the most devastating mistake Patrick could ever make. I pulled into my parents' driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Through the upstairs window, I could see Patrick moving around his childhood bedroom, probably adjusting his tie or checking his appearance one final time. He looked so happy, so ready for his new life, completely unaware that the woman he was about to marry had never loved him at all. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward the front door, knowing that once I stepped inside and spoke the truth, neither Patrick nor I would ever be the same again. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother appeared, beaming with excitement, her face glowing with the joy only a mother feels on her child's wedding day. Jamie, perfect timing. Patrick's upstairs getting ready, but he's been pacing for the last hour. I think he needs his big sister to calm his nerves. If only she knew the kind of nerves I was about to give him. I climbed the familiar stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was lined with family photos, Patrick and me as children, school pictures, graduation shots. Moments of happiness that now felt like they belonged to a different lifetime. I paused outside his bedroom door, gathering courage for what came next. I knocked softly and heard his voice call out, "Come in." Patrick stood in front of his childhood mirror, adjusting his tie with the same nervous energy he'd shown before school presentations and job interviews. He looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, more grown up than I'd ever seen him. His face lit up when he saw me. "Jamie, thank goodness you're here. I can't get this tie right and Mom keeps crying every time she looks at me. I think I might actually throw up before we get to the church." The happiness in his voice was like a knife to my heart. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to find words for the impossible conversation ahead. "Patrick," I said quietly, "I need to show you something. And I need you to sit down." Something in my tone made his smile fade. "What's wrong? You look like someone died." In a way, someone had. The Patrick who trusted completely, who believed in fairy tale endings, who thought he'd found his soulmate. That version of my brother was about to disappear forever. "I need you to stay calm," I said, pulling out my phone. "What I'm about to show you is going to be devastating, but I need you to see it before you walk down that aisle." His face went pale. "Jamie, you're scaring me." I held out my phone, displaying the first photograph I'd taken in the garage. Scott and Shannon embracing on that unknown beach, looking blissfully happy together. Patrick stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. I watched his face cycle through confusion, his brain trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then disbelief, as if this couldn't possibly be real. Recognition came next as the reality of the image sank in. Finally, devastating comprehension settled over his features like a shadow. "What is this?" he whispered. "I found it in Scott's garage this morning. Someone sent me a message telling me to look." I swiped to the next photo, then the next. "There are dozens of them, Patrick." His hands began to shake as he took the phone from me, scrolling through image after image of the woman he loved with my husband. I watched my brother's world crumble in real time, each photograph destroying another piece of his trust, his future, his faith in love itself. "How long?" The words barely escaped his throat. "Months, maybe longer." The photos spanned different seasons. I sat beside him on his childhood bed, the same spot where I comforted him through nightmares and heartbreaks years ago. "Patrick, there's more." Text messages. I showed him the printed conversations, watching him read Shannon's words about pretending with him, about the marriage being necessary, about planning her real future with Scott. Each message was another blow, and I could see him physically recoiling from the screen. "She never loved me," he said, his voice hollow. "This whole time she was just using me." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." He was quiet for a long time, reading through the messages again, studying the photos with the desperate attention of someone hoping to find evidence that this was all a mistake. That there was no ambiguity in Scott and Shannon's happiness together. No way to misinterpret their intimate conversations about deceiving him. Finally, he looked up at me. "What do we do?" The question surprised me. I'd expected him to fall apart, to rage or cry or refuse to believe the evidence. Instead, Patrick was asking for strategy. The hurt was there. I could see it in his eyes. But underneath was something harder, more determined. "We have options," I said carefully. We could confront them privately, cancel the wedding quietly, tell the guests there was an emergency. Or we could let them face the consequences publicly. Let everyone see who Shannon really is. Patrick was quiet, processing. All those people came here for us, for what they thought was our love story. My college friends drove 8 hours. Shannon's aunt flew in from California. I know, but they also deserve to know they're not witnessing a real wedding. They're watching someone manipulate and use you. He stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the street where he'd learned to ride a bike, where we'd played as children. She was going to go through with it, he said. Actually marry me, knowing she was planning to continue with Scott. The messages suggest they were going to figure out how to be together after the wedding. You would have been her legal husband while she lived her real life with him. Using me for what? Money, status, health insurance. Does it matter? The point is, she was willing to destroy your life for her convenience. Patrick turned back to me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. A cold anger that made him look older, harder. She deserves to face this publicly, in front of everyone who thinks she's so perfect. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no taking it back. She made her choice when she decided to betray me, when she decided to use me. He straightened his shoulders. How do we do it? We spent the next 40 minutes planning every detail. Patrick would handle the moment at the altar when the officiant asked for objections. I would stay in the front row, ready to provide evidence if Shannon tried to deny or deflect. We discussed how to tell our parents, how to handle the inevitable questions from guests, how to minimize the damage to innocent people caught in the aftermath. What about Scott? Patrick asked. He'll probably show up when Shannon calls him in a panic. I'll handle him. This is going to destroy both our marriages. My marriage was already destroyed, I said. I just didn't know it yet. As we prepared to leave for the venue, something strange happened. The initial shock and heartbreak began settling into a calm, focused determination. We weren't just victims anymore. We were allies, united in protecting our family from people who would use and betray us. Patrick adjusted his tie one final time, but now he wasn't preparing for a wedding. He was preparing for battle, and I had never been more proud of his strength. Ready? I asked. He nodded. Let's go end this. The drive to the church felt like traveling through a dream sequence. Patrick sat beside me in the passenger seat, unnaturally calm for someone whose life had just imploded. Our parents followed in their car, blissfully unaware that their carefully planned celebration was about to become something entirely different. You don't have to do this, I said one final time as we pulled into the church parking lot. We could still handle this privately. No, Patrick replied, his voice steady. She made this choice. She can live with the consequences. The historic stone church looked beautiful in the late morning sunlight. White ribbons fluttered from the entrance, and I could see guests streaming inside, dressed in their finest clothes and carrying cameras to capture what they thought would be joyful memories. My stomach twisted knowing what was actually about to unfold. Inside, the sanctuary was transformed. Shannon's Pinterest vision had come to life perfectly. White roses and baby's breath adorned every pew, fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling, and soft classical music played from the organ. Everything looked exactly as we'd planned during those countless Saturday afternoons, when I believed I was helping create the perfect day for two people who truly loved each other. I took my place in the front row, smoothing my navy dress and checking that my phone was easily accessible. Around me, our extended family chatted excitedly. Patrick's college friends filled several rows, some traveling from across the country for this moment. Shannon's side was smaller but no less enthusiastic. Her aunt from California, a few childhood friends, co-workers from the marketing firm where she'd worked before quitting to focus on wedding planning. The processional began and my heart started racing. Patrick walked down the aisle with our father, looking handsome and composed. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set just slightly too tight. He caught my eye as he passed, and I nodded, a silent reminder that I was here, that we were in this together. He took his position at the altar, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. The officiant, Pastor Williams, who had baptized both Patrick and me, smiled warmly at the gathered crowd. He had no idea he was about to witness something unprecedented in his 40 years of performing wedding ceremonies. Then the wedding march began and Shannon appeared at the back of the church. She looked absolutely radiant. Her dress, the one I'd helped her find at that sample sale, fit perfectly, cascading around her in layers of silk and lace. Her veil trailed behind her like something from a fairy tale. She'd never looked more beautiful, more bride-like, more convincing in the role she was playing. The contrast between her apparent joy and the ugly truth I carried felt surreal. Here was a woman walking toward her victim with a smile, about to promise him love and fidelity while planning to betray him within hours of saying, "I do." The audacity of it took my breath away. Shannon's eyes were locked on Patrick as she walked down the aisle, her smile never wavering. She looked like every bride should look, happy, nervous, glowing with love. But I knew now it was all performance, carefully constructed to serve her purposes. She reached the altar and took Patrick's hands, still smiling. Pastor Williams began the ceremony with his usual warm words about love, commitment, and the sanctity of marriage. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Patrick and Shannon in holy matrimony," Pastor Williams continued. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence, discretion, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted." Shannon squeezed Patrick's hands, probably interpreting his stillness as wedding nerves rather than the calm before a storm. The ceremony proceeded normally for several minutes. Readings about love for Corinthians, Pastor Williams speaking about the commitment they were making to each other, traditional words that now felt like mockery given what I knew about Shannon's real intentions. Then came the moment we'd been waiting for. If any person present knows of any lawful impediment why these two may not be joined together in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The church fell into that traditional moment of silence, guests probably expecting the usual pause before the ceremony continued. Instead, Patrick's voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." The audible gasp that swept through the congregation was immediate and overwhelming. Heads turned, voices murmured, and I felt the entire atmosphere of the church shift from celebration to confusion to growing tension. Shannon's face went white, then flushed deep red as panic replaced her bridal glow. "What are you doing?" she hissed, trying to maintain her smile for the guests while her eyes showed pure terror. "I'm objecting to marrying someone who's been having an affair with my sister's husband," Patrick said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 guests sat frozen, trying to process what they just heard. Pastor Williams looked completely bewildered, clearly having never encountered anything like this in his decades of performing ceremonies. Shannon's composure began cracking visibly. "That's not... Patrick, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Patrick replied, his voice calm but carrying through the church's acoustics. "I have photographs, Shannon. Text messages. Everything." I watched from the front row as Shannon's perfect facade started crumbling. Her desperate eyes swept the crowd, landing on me with a look of pure hatred. "This is Jamie's doing," she declared, her voice getting shrill. "She's always been jealous that I was joining the family. She fabricated this." But Patrick was ready. He pulled out his phone, holding up one of the photos for Shannon to see. "Did Jamie fabricate you kissing Scott on a beach in Mexico? Did she fake these text messages about your real future together?" Shannon's final attempts at denial became increasingly desperate. "Fine. Yes, we had feelings for each other, but I chose you. I'm here, aren't I? I was going to be faithful." "The messages are from yesterday, Shannon," Patrick said quietly, but his words carried to every corner of the church. "You were planning to continue this after today." That's when Shannon's facade shattered completely. The beautiful, composed bride disappeared, replaced by someone ugly and desperate. She screamed at Patrick, at me, at the guests who sat in stunned silence watching her meltdown. Finally, she ripped off her veil, threw it at Patrick's feet, and stormed down the aisle in her wedding dress, the train trailing behind her like the remnants of broken promises. The church erupted in chaos as she pushed through the doors, leaving 300 people and one devastated crew to make sense of what they just witnessed. The church had emptied slowly after Shannon's dramatic exit, guests filing out in stunned clusters, whispering among themselves about what they just witnessed. Some approached Patrick with awkward condolences, others simply left without knowing what to say. The fairy lights that had seemed so magical an hour earlier now illuminated an empty sanctuary that felt more like a crime scene than a wedding venue. I was helping Patrick remove the boutonnieres from his tuxedo jacket when my phone rang. Scott's name appeared on the screen and my stomach clenched. Jamie, what the hell is going on? Shannon just called me crying, saying the wedding was cancelled. She's not making any sense. I'm sure she's not, I replied calmly. Where are you? At the office, finishing up some work before the reception. What happened? The lie came so easily to him even now. You should come to the church, Scott. We need to talk. He arrived 30 minutes later, his face pale and drawn. The moment he walked into the sanctuary and saw me standing there with Patrick, Pastor Williams, and my parents, he understood that his carefully constructed world had collapsed. You destroyed everything, he said, his voice hollow. No, I replied, surprised by how steady I sounded. You did that when you decided to have an affair with my brother's fiancé. You did that when you helped her plan to use Patrick for her own benefit while she continued her real relationship with you. Scott's attempts at justification were pathetic. He claimed I'd misunderstood the situation, that the photos were old, that he and Shannon had ended things months ago. But his guilt was written across every feature of his face, and each lie only made him look more desperate. Those text messages were from yesterday, Scott, I said, pulling out my phone to show him his own words. You were planning to pick her up from her apartment after the reception. He crumbled admitting to the affair but trying to paint it as mutual attraction that had gotten out of hand. He never once apologized for the pain he'd caused Patrick, never acknowledged the cruelty of their deception. Instead, he focused on his own wounded feelings as if he were the victim in this situation. By evening, he was gone. He packed whatever fit in his car and left, muttering about finding a hotel until he could make permanent arrangements. I watched from the window as he drove away, feeling nothing but relief that I'd never have to pretend to trust him again. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional processing. Each document I signed in my lawyer's office felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been stolen. Division of assets, custody of our shared belongings, the dissolution of 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures on official forms. Patrick moved back into his childhood bedroom temporarily, and surprisingly, it helped both of us heal. We spent long evenings on our parents' porch swing, the same spot where we'd solved childhood problems and shared teenage secrets. He was heartbroken but grateful, struggling with trust issues but relieved to have escaped Shannon's manipulation before it was too late. I don't know how I'll ever trust anyone again, he admitted one evening as we watched fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. You will, I assured him. Not everyone is like Shannon. You'll learn to recognize the signs, to trust your instincts. This experience will make you stronger, more discerning. How are you so calm about all this? Your marriage is over too. I considered his question carefully, because I realize now that my marriage was already over. I just didn't know it. Scott had checked out emotionally long before Shannon came along. At least now I can start building something real instead of living in a fantasy. Our family rallied around us in ways that surprised me. Aunts and uncles called to offer support. Cousins reached out with words of encouragement. Most surprisingly, several family members admitted they'd had suspicions about Shannon but hadn't known how to voice their concerns. She always seemed too good to be true, my mother confessed. Too eager to please, too perfect in every conversation. But I thought I was just being an overprotective mother-in-law. My father was more direct. Something about her never sat right with me. She was always performing, never just being herself. The empty spaces in my house where Scott's belongings had been didn't feel lonely. They felt like possibilities. I turned his home office back into the art studio I'd given up years earlier, setting up an easel near the window where the morning light was best. The first painting I completed was abstract, swirls of deep blues and bright golds that somehow captured both the pain and the liberation I felt. Quiet evenings that had once felt suffocating now felt peaceful. I rediscovered books I'd neglected, tried recipes I'd always wanted to attempt, reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. The independence that had been forced upon me gradually became a choice, a preference for authentic solitude over comfortable deception. The poetic justice of how things unfolded became clear within weeks. Shannon and Scott's relationship, built on secrecy and the thrill of betrayal, couldn't survive in the harsh light of exposure. Without the excitement of deception and the promise of having everything they wanted, their connection crumbled quickly. Shannon left town within a month, according to mutual acquaintances who reported she'd taken a job in another state. Scott moved across the country for what he claimed was a career opportunity. but I suspected he was running from the shame of having his true character revealed to everyone who mattered. They both simply disappeared from our lives, leaving behind only the valuable lesson of what happens when people choose manipulation over authenticity, deception over truth. My revenge hadn't been explosive or dramatic. It hadn't involved elaborate schemes or public humiliation beyond what they brought upon themselves. It had been something far more powerful. Truth delivered at exactly the right moment to protect the person I loved most. The greatest victory wasn't in destroying my enemies, but in saving Patrick from a lifetime of lies and saving myself from the prison of other people's deceptions. Sometimes the most profound justice comes not from punishment, but from liberation. The freedom to build authentic lives on foundations of truth rather than comfortable illusions. As I sat in my reclaimed art studio painting my new reality, I realized that I'd never been more grateful for a cryptic text message that had arrived just in time to change everything. If this story of family protection and truth had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Patrick objected at the altar, exposing Shannon's lies in front of everyone. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.